If you are ready, we can. Greetings and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much indeed for joining Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability around the world and across Africa. I'm George Mutalemwa in Mwanza, Tanzania, and I'm moderating this session on behalf of Solidarity for Peace and Development, MAMA. And our theme today is Operation Democracy in Comoro 2008, a Tanzanian perspective with Assah Andrew Mwambene. And Assah Mwambene is a journalist, a communications expert. He served as head of government communication and director of information and chief government spokesperson for Tanzania. He also served as communication liaison officer in the African Union's Operation Democracy in Comoro. And Assah Mwambene was here with us before. He gave us a presentation. So we are glad and privileged to have you with us today. So you're welcome, Assah, and please do join me in welcoming Assah Andrew Mwambene. Please welcome.
My name is Assah Andrew Mwambene, and I'm speaking from Arusha, the tourism capital of Tanzania. And my presentation today is about Operation Democracy in Comoro. This was an African Union-backed military strike that hosted a rebel leader, Kanali Mohamed Bakal, in Anjuan, Comoro, in March 2008. Let me allude some part of the historical that the Union of the Comoro is an island in the Indian Ocean and got its independence in 1975 from the French. And historically, it was a country with 4 islands. One of the main islands is called Ngazija, where the Moroni, the capital, is located. And we have another island called Moheli, and then Anjuan, and Mayotte. So Mayotte, Ngazija, Moheli, and Anjuan formed part of the Union of the Comoros. But during a referendum in 1975, Mayotte voted to be part of the French. So it remains to be part of the French department until now. But if you look at the Comoro flag, the 4 stars that you're seeing and the colors, you can see yellow, white, red, and blue. They all represent the 4 colors of these islands. And Comoro still regard Mayotte as a part of the Union of the Comoros. So,
Assah, are you able to proceed? Assah, it seems that we've lost him.
Bob Denard was responsible to many in Latin America.
Assah, we missed the last 3, ideas. If you can go back to this background.
Responsible for, at some point,
there is a bit of a problem with the connection there. So we are waiting for our speaker. I hope that you'll be joining us again soon.
The system usually restarts, but I don't see him yet.
He's restarting.
There we go.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sorry, I went off. I'm trying to share the screen again.
All right. Please do.
This is something, you learn something
Hello?
new every day. So today I learned that the Comoros are between Madagascar and Tanzania.
Yeah, sure. I was partly involved in both the Madagascar post-election violence with Lavalomanana and La Jolina. Can you see my?
Oh, we did for a moment.
Can you see my presentation? No.
The screen share just stopped,
Okay.
and we don't have an image. We see that your camera is on, but it's not transmitting.
Okay. And then can you see it there?
The sharing has
Not yet.
it's not showing up.
nakuomba kaka. Ndio watu wako online tayari. Okay.
We are used to this, you know. This is just the technical tax that we all pay.
But it should be sorted soon. Let me start afresh. Okay.
George, do you have the slide deck?
What?
No.
Let me see.
Screen sharing is operating.
Yeah.
Can you put it in presentation mode?
What?
Can you put it in full screen presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Oops.
Maybe if we could actually, Assah, if you hear us, maybe you can talk
Yes,
without
I can hear
the.
Okay, can I talk without?
Yeah, you can talk without
Okay,
it, and
fine.
then
Okay, fine.
you try to act if
I will share.
it's
Okay.
necessary.
So
Right.
the Operation Democracy in Comoro was an operation conducted in March 2007. It was a military strike that sought to oust the labor leaders who had emerged in 2001 to 2007. Kanali Mohamed Bakal in Anjouan Island. Historically, Comoro, Union of the Comoros, is a country with 4 islands: the Moheli, Anjouan, Ngazija, which is the main island. They call it Grand Island, where the capital Moroni is, and and Mayotte. But during the referendum in 1975, the Mayotte Island voted against, voted to be part of the French department. They call it French Département. And therefore, until now, although the Union of the Comoros consider Mayotte part of the 4 islands forming the Union of the Comoros, but the Mayotte residents consider themselves part of the French department. And so there were many unfolding issues from 2007, especially in 2001. Kanali Mohamed Bakal was part of the team that took over power from the president. You know, in Comoro, they have a common president who is the union president. And they also, okay, so the picture that you are seeing, the Grand Comoro is the island that you are seeing on top. And the Moeli, the small one, the one down is Mayotte, and the other one is the third one in the middle is Anjouan. And during the, as I said, during the referendum, after the Mayotte became part of the French, the Union of the Comoros considered to be consider Mayotte as a part of the Union of the Comoros. So in 2001, Colonel Mwambene Bakari was one of the team members who took power by force in the Anjouan Island, because normally they have elections from each island, and then later they have a union presidency elections. And Colonel Mwambene Bakari, after entering into power in 2001, and more specifically 2000, because they took power by force in 2001, but officially he became a president in 2002. So he was in power until 2007, and he still wanted to cling on power even after the Anjouan court, actually including the Union of the Comoros court, declaring that his time was up. So he forced his way in, and the African Union the elections and ensure that Colonel Mwambene Bakari in 2007 does not participate in the elections as it was planned. And they also took a gentleman called Francisca Madeira, an ambassador, is a former diplomat from Mozambique, who was a special envoy for African Union Commission in the standoff in Comoro. So Tanzania contribute troops and people who could also help to oversee elections in Anjouan. And South Africa was asked to provide logistical part of it. But very unfortunately that in 2007, Tanzania took its about 200 military men and women to Anjouan as a part of the mission, as a part of the African Union, to help oversee the elections and ensure that the elections were held in a free and fair manner. Of course, South Africa did not honor its obligation. It is my technician is just coming in to help if he can fix it, and then you see the slide. That would be nice. Also, is here with me for just 1 minute. So I will continue talking as he's fixing the gadget. So after the mandate by the African Union to have Tanzania and South Africa do administer the election in Anjouan, two things happened. One, South Africa never honored the role that was entrusted upon, but Tanzania did contribute the troops to take the about 200 people in Comoro. But the second aspect is that the same year Tanzania became the chair of the African Union. After Tanzania, especially in January 2007, that's exactly when Tanzania took over as the chair of the African Union. And so two things will happen in Addis Ababa. In Addis Ababa, when we were doing the first handover, one, the Comoro government. The Comoro government. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the Comorian government put up a request to the African Union that to ask if they can support to get rid of a rebel leader who, refused to leave power voluntarily. And so he asked for the support from the African countries who could help, get rid of him. So Tanzania, Sudan, Libya, and Senegal volunteered to provide military men and women to help Comoro. So a lot of course, negotiations were done in between 2007 up to February 2008. As I said, Francisca Madeira, a former diplomat from Mozambique, who was tasked to, as a representative of the chair of the Commission of the African Union, to mediate. And of course, the Tanzania being the chair of the African Union, the foreign minister by then, Bernard Membe, were in a very close consultations, flying into Mozambique to Comoro and Dar es Salaam, trying to see to it that Kanali Mwambene Bakali could leave, or he was given actually three options. The first option, he should remain in Juan, but stop clinging into power. The second option was that if he decides to leave, African Union would provide a passage for him, a safety passage for him. And the third option was stay in, cling on power, and risk being removed by force. So deployment, when after the African Union member states, Senegal, Tanzania, Sudan, and the Comoro themselves, of course, Libya also did not contribute troops, but they provided logistical support in terms of financing, finance some of the deployment of the military men and women. So the Tanzania, Comoro, and Sudan, of course, with Libya, honored their promise. But in the 11th hour, South Africa and Senegal pulled out of the support. And after the Tanzania, after this, South Africa did not just keep quiet, they also continued with the shuttle diplomacy in the African Union and the United Nations, trying to block the Operation Democracy in Comoro, and they opted for negotiations. They still instead of the military strike. But traditionally also, the African Union was just emerging from a slumber. It has just established itself a peace and security architecture, and it has never had a process or a military strike of this nature before. So this, so to say, was the first operation by the African Union to use force, just a replica of the mandate of the United Nations, where the soldiers who go for a combat are allowed to enforce peace. So this was possibly the first African Union operations that used force to remove somebody in power. Of course, they had a very clear mandate in terms of what they were tasked to do. One is just to get rid of the labor leader and ensure that they stabilize the country. And the angerness with the part of the Comoro was that previously French had annexed the island called Mayotte. And this was also envisaged that it was the same plan by the French, that they wanted to annex another island so that they can take it to be part of the French. And if you look at the geographically, the Mayotte, the Anjouan is one of the very had a very fertile soil, and agriculture is very prominent in Anjouan, unlike many other islands of Ngazija and Moheli. And this also complicated the situation that this guy, Kanali Mwambene Bakali, must, we must get rid of it. But of course, the presence of South Africa and the shuttle diplomacy that they used going to the United Nations, trying to block the operation, also complicated a lot of discussions, because by then the former president of South Africa had assured the Anjouan labor leader that all are in order. The soldiers from Tanzania and Sudan will not be coming, because we are still in the negotiation. So that process also encouraged so much the rebel leader in Anjouan to remain resistant, and they never honored any call that
Apologies again, because it seems the speaker has issues with connection. So I ask for your patience, and I hope he will be joining us very soon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I just saw myself that I've been locked out. So I was just saying that this operation was an operation of its kind that never happened before within the structures of the African Union. And if you consider the Constitutive Act of the African Union from the predecessor institution of the OAU, never subscribed operations of this nature. Most of the instruments that were used before during the OAU era was just a condemnation and sometimes sanctions, but it never really guaranteed an aspect of the military operations to get rid of any somebody who come into power on a military or in a coup d'etat. And some experts who have been really looking at the way this operation was conducted, some praised the African Union that it was starting to institute some of the necessary instruments that can reinforce the presence of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, a replica of the UN Security Council. But at the same time, I want to say that this operation was an ad hoc kind of operations that was more ignited by the willingness and enthusiasm from the chair of the African Union, who was by then the President Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, partly because of the friendly relations that existed from historical with Comoro. Those who knows Tanzania in the 70s and 80s was one of the countries that actually played a very great role, not only in freedom struggle, countries that were struggling from freedom in Southern Africa, but almost all the Indian islands, including Seychelles, Comoro, Madagascar, and Madagascar. And the second aspect is that the history of Comoro, having many foreign players, especially the French, and as I mentioned earlier about the role of Bob Denard, a French mercenary who was partly well involved in most of the coup d'etat in Comoro, but in many other countries in Africa and Latin America, including Benin, Seychelles, and Congo. And with the French involvement in the Comoro, and the aspect that the Union government was also struggling, and it appeared that Colonel Mohamed Bakar in Anjouan had a very big connection and support from also the French government. They had to do a joint military operations, which now started, actual deployment started from the 18 March in 2008. As well, the deployment was done in the Grand Comoro at the city of Moroni. And then we moved back to Moheli. Moheli is an island that is located about 38 nautical miles from the Anjouan. So because there were a lot of shuttle diplomacy in terms of blocking this operation, and especially with the South Africa taking a leading role, March 2025. March 25, 2008. But because of this shuttle diplomacy, it was, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
Now,
hear you.
diplomacy, the decision had to be made quickly to do the operation a week before the planned date. So March 25, 2008 was not an actual date that the operation was planned to start, but it started just a week before the planned date. And as I said, it's because Tanzania, which took a leading role in this process, was never listened to any rhetorics about stopping the operation, because the military men and women were already in Mweli, which is just 38 nautical miles away from the area that the operation started. Now, and until now, actually, it's very unfortunate that apart from the fact that this was a very successful operation in terms of that it was an operation that, of course, many people were captured, especially on the first 3 days. I remember I was I was a liaison officer, and I was a communication liaison officer of this operation. And in the first day, about 300 soldiers from the Canal Bakal were annexed at the port, because the structure were that the Tanzania soldiers were tasked to capture the airport and the gendarmerie, the headquarters of gendarmerie in Anjuan. The Comoro army were asked to capture the airport, and so these were two major areas that, if were to be captured, they would decapitate any operation for the Anjuan regime to possibly to surrender. Of course, the operation from the Tanzania side to capture the airport and gendarmerie was very successful, and then they moved on to capture the headquarters of they call it White House, the headquarters of the army. And as they moved around to go to the state house of the Anjuan, it was also heard that the airport was yet to be captured. So the Tanzania army had to bounce back to go and support the Comorian army at the airport. And then, of course, the process was very complete after that. And this was one of the operations that had very minimum casualties. From my understanding, is that only when one person died and about 3 people wounded. The person who died was a soldier from Tanzania, and actually dropped out of the ship down, and it was not actually in the actual confrontation. But I understand quite a number of soldiers from the Anjuan army also were injured. So apart from that, this was a very successful operation. There were 2 missing aspects that possibly could have contributed to the current manifestation of events in Comoro. One were the institutions of governance and the institutional transitional justice mechanisms, which were supposed to have been in place or to have been administered to the Comoros, were not administered. Processes that are very commonly done to ensure that the country does not go back to the fighting again. So processes like disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and the security sector reforms weren't administered at the end of this operation. And as we speak, the very president who was an engine for this operation, President Ahmed Abdallah Sambi, a former president of Comoro, of the Union of the Comoro, is in custody at the moment. The current he has been in the bar for the last 3 years, and nobody knows what at the moment, but also there are others who are supporting the current president who is in power, and he came back for the second time, the current president in Comoro. So in a way, because most of the democratic principles and democratic processes, and because of the processes like DDR and SSR were not administered, Comoro has remained to be what it is now, and I cannot predict what will happen in the next, considering the current the manifestation of events that with the African Union, Tanzania itself has volunteered at some point to send envoys to go and persuade the current president of Comoro, to negotiate with the former president instead of putting him in jail for the last 3 years. But still nothing positive has emanated from. The last point that I want to possibly make about Comoro is that Comoro is essentially still a very poor country with a lot of influence of the French, and in terms of the economies, the financial transactions, and most of the Comoro agriculture cannot sustain the majority of the people in Comoro. So they largely depends on the supplies from many neighboring countries like Tanzania, maybe Kenya and South Africa, and even the ocean, which is part of the livelihood of the people in Comoro, part of the share of that, especially the fishing industry, that could have been part of the foreign currency earner for Comoro. It was kind of sold to the businessmen away from Comoro. So it's like Comoro no longer own the deep sea fishing enclave for Comoro. The right to fish has been given to the French and many other players, and so it remains to be a poor country, and the institutions of these institutions of governance aren't strong enough to guarantee any prediction of the future of Comoro. So unless some of the fundamental and the structural institutions were put in place that could guarantee the future of Comoro, Comoro will remain to be what it is at the moment. Let me end up there, and if there's anybody with any questions, I'll be more than happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Assah, for this great presentation. And because we had issues with connection, so some things might have not been so clear, but Assah is asking for comments, observations, and our own experiences, talking about Operation Democracy in Comoro. And it's quite interesting that we are talking about democracy, but also the speaker is talking about also military operation by the African Union, that there was this use of force as a way of ensuring peace and security in Comoro. And I was wondering how we can put these two things together. One, the use of force, military operation, but also democracy. Can we have a democratic military operation? So anyway, I'm asking for questions now and comments from the audience here. It's nice having you all. This is a Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development. So you may raise your hand. Yes.
Can I ask a question, George?
Yes, please, Laid, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question, of course, to the speaker. I just want to know what types of relation Comoro has with the French public.
Can you repeat, please? Sorry, I can't hear you well. The last part I didn't.
Yeah, my question is what types of relation Comoro has maintained with the French state?
Okay. Let me to start with the question that has been asked by Dr. Mtalema. Let me respond this way. If you look at the structure of the United Nations, we have two ways of looking at any interventions that the UN do to any country. Normally, agree to stop fighting, so you have an intervention force. But so most of the interventions by the UN are on two categories. One is Chapter 6 mandate. That means that it's a peace operation, peace. But Chapter 7, the process that the Tanzania partly participated in DRC Congo under the FIB, the International Neutral Force. So they went to Congo under Chapter 7 mandate. That is, you negotiate. An aspect that this is an important aspect, that when you see the people down in problems, and especially when we look at the things like the war crime, crime against humanity, and genocide, they guarantee that in order to rescue, you must use the mandate that the peace enforcement. So you force as a part of rescuing or possibly providing democracy to others. But with regard to Comoro, as I explained, this is one single person and his group seized power in 2001, and in 2002 officially declared himself a president, and then he wanted to do it again in the next phase, when officially he had actually exhausted his mandate for almost more than 7 or 6 years. Now, even the country's court declared him that it is illegal for him to vie for a second time, because the system provide a one-term mandate, which he has exceeded. So democracy, in the sense that this was an operation of getting rid of an individual. It was not a fight against a country or any sovereign state. So the Operation Democracy, it was meant to safeguard the peoples of Comoro from the illegal annexation of democratic principles and the democratic space that maybe they needed, because to elect is a mandate that every individuals within a country are given, and if you are denied that space, automatically you are infringing their own democratic space. So that's why the operation was designed in that level, and almost closer to a Chapter 7 mandate of the UN Security Council. And with regard to the current connection between the French and Comoro, I want to say Comoro and French, they still enjoy a very cordial relationship. And I want also to mention something that possibly I forgot to mention. This operation was also supported by the French. Actually, French were part of the logistical, supported the logistical part of the operation. The unfolding issues that came later was that when we went to Comoro, as we went to the house that this Colonel Bakari was staying, we were able to get some of the arms that were labeled French. So people thought that partly the French were in one hand supporting the logistical part, and on the one hand supporting the labor leader in Anjouan. So, but essentially, the French are still very well connected to Comoro, and even the financial transaction of the Comoros depends from a space from the French systems. So you cannot get a single coin in Comoro without passing Paris. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Please raise your hand or just put your question in chat if you have any. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen so that we see each other. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, now we see that camera.
Can you see me?
No, we can't see you.
It is complicated. Okay.
Yeah. As long as we hear you, I think that's
Okay.
good enough. And so, how is the situation like now in Comoro? Has peace returned since 2008? Assah, do you hear me?
I can hear you. I can
All
hear you
right.
very
So,
okay.
okay. So, it's like, how is the situation like now? Is it? Do we have sustainable peace over there?
No, well, as I noted, the situation in Comoro currently is not very good in terms of we don't even talk about sustainability, because when you are talking something sustainable, it means that now you are okay. But whether you guarantee that it will be sustainable to the future, so in Comoro it has never been stable. But the current situation amount to what people call an early warning that there is a tension actually which existed even during the operation itself. Azali Asmani, who is the current president at the moment, was a former president also. And they still, within that operation, we had about 4 attempts of trying to topple the Ahmed Abdallah Sambi, who was the current president. And that's why we had a chunk of our security men and women who were also responsible to secure him. And so when we were crossing over to Anjouan, it was the same day that there was another attempt that was so there have been, so the tension of these two people is getting Comoro very fragile, and we cannot just predict the future.
Yes. Please, I can't see you because of the. Just go on and speak, please.
Because I'm. Maybe you can let them ask directly.
Yes. If you have a question, please just ask.
Okay. Maybe you can ask question directly.
Right. So let me also ask because I don't see another hand here being raised. You mentioned that this was the first time that the African Union used force, as
Yes.
a way of restoring peace in Comoro. Has the African Union used now force anywhere else after that? And how do you see this method or strategy of peace building? Whether it's, what is your take on it?
Okay. Well, two things happen possibly in Somalia, for instance. the Kenya had at one time took their own army in Somalia. And when things became very difficult, because traditionally, when we measure security vulnerability of any country, normally we start looking at how secure are the neighbors. And normally, fighting your neighbor is very risky, that your neighbor can anytime, and especially African borders that are very long, and you can't just have firewalls, every part of it to rescue or to bar someone from coming to your country. So many security analysts thought that Kenya taking their own army in Comoro, I mean in Somalia, would be tantamount to threatening the very security of their own country because of the closeness and the neighborliness. And if you look at the foreign policy of many countries, one aspect that does not miss is that every country declares to, protect territorial integrity, but at the same time, the neighborliness, because it is part of the security strategy to do that. But when Kenya did take its force in Somalia, they later realized that it was not something good to do, and so later they were now co-opted just as a part of the Uganda army under the auspices of the African Union, of course, with the UN support. I know, so if you want to say if there's any replica of the same, I would say yes, the one in Somalia. The second replica of the same is the FIB, the International Neutral Force. The first operation that got rid of the M23 in Eastern Congo. You remember in 2009, Tanzania contributed about a battalion to Congo, in Eastern Congo, to fight under Chapter 7 mandate to peace enforcement to get rid of the rebels of the called the M23 or M23. So if you want to point, because the Tanzania participation was partly SADC and partly African Union, although they went in Congo under the umbrella of the UN as FIB. FIB is a short form for, so it's a French acronym for like International Neutral Force. And so if you want a replica of the same, is the one that got rid of M23 in 2009, and the aspect that Kenya did in Somalia. But in terms of successes, there isn't any other operations that was more successful than the one that the replica of the same in Comoro. I understand also that as we speak, Rwanda is partly has contributed troops in Mozambique. And of course, Mozambique is also doing a process that I've also mentioned there of the DDR, after discovering that in the past, this process was not part of the solution to the problems in Mozambique. So they are partly doing with the foreign interventions, but at the same time, they are also doing DDR now to ensure that most of the scattered arms that were scattered among rebels, especially Renamo and many others, they are also rounded up, and they're seeing to it that most of the players in these destabilization of Mozambique are also partly either given a chance to live a better life somewhere else or change their fortunes. And so this is a process. But in terms of successes, the Comoro remain to be the only successful operation of the African Union ever.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. I hear somebody speaking in the background, but I can't really tell who that is. So, but just feel free, please, to ask a question to our speaker.
Donna looks like is want to say something.
I don't
Donna
want to
Peter.
say anything.
Okay.
I want to
Okay.
stop. Sorry.
Helen Ware here. Can I just ask a little about the politics of Comoros? Who who are the sort of principal players, and are they just playing for each man wanting to have power, or is there some ideology difference between the different sides in Comoros?
Well, traditionally, most of the French colonies, if you go to Burkina Faso, if you go to Rwanda, of course, Rwanda, Belgium partly was, but if you go to countries that were former colonies of the French, let's look at, for instance, if you go to Seychelles today, you'll find that destabilization processes or foreign interventions like the one the Bob Denard aspect. If you look at how people profiled Bob Denard in Comoro, you find that from historical, the French have had a very direct connection in terms of day-to-day politics of the Comoro Islands. And if I also mention an aspect that if you go to a bank today in Comoro, be sure that whatever that you're transacting, must have a green light from the French. But the second aspect is that all these leaders of, with save the former president Abdallah Mohamed Sambi, were more aligned to French, like the current president Azali Asman. And so if you want to say French influence is so big, especially in Comoro, in terms of businesses, in terms of connection, and people feel still that if they go or if if they go to France, it's like they are going to their own capital, and almost the same. Although Mayotte is more enjoying the connection to the French than these three islands, and but the only thing that brought like Anjouan more closer to the French, and of course South Africa as well, is that it is a very fertile place with a very rare some herbs and plants that are so much demanded for the manufacturing and manufacturing of the chemicals and and many other cosmetics that are being used, especially by the French, and especially Langi plant and many others. So it's very rare place that most of the plants that you can see there are on high demands in abroad, especially to the French enclave. So to conclude, I want just to say that Comoro politics are sort of now manned actually still by Paris.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Helen and Assah, for the response. And maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit, Assah, about Tanzania's interest really in Comoro. Is it because of the proximity that these are neighboring countries and probably they share some, cultural, background? Why did Tanzania take such strong interest in Comoro?
Let me remind you, Dr. Mteremwa, that Tanzania connection with the islands in the Indian Ocean, which is Comoro, Seychelles, Madagascar, and Mauritius. For a long time, Tanzania foreign policy has regarded good neighborness as one of the highest policy of foreign policy for Tanzania. Considering also that the Indian Ocean is so long and big, building connection with the islands available there was the best thing to do in order to secure our own territorial integrity and sovereignty. And therefore, if you look at our Tanzania foreign policy from the one that was decreed by Mwalimu Nyerere, and the new foreign policy that we have of 2001, you will see that one of the principles of Tanzania, number 403, is good neighborness. And we have done so to all our neighbors in Eastern Congo, in Burundi, in Rwanda, in Kenya, and at least we are very fortunate. We were also well involved in all the Kenya post-election violence in 2009, even from 2007 as well. So our involvement in the area of the Indian Ocean, Seychelles, Comoro, Madagascar, is more essentially on the principles that we have heard. And when we talk about issues of principle, really, we mean that if somebody says it is a matter of principle, it means that these are issues, don't ask us what we benefit. Normally, it's our resolve as a country that we will cherish this thing as an important role, partly on our own territorial integrity and safeguarding our own sovereignty, but also as an aspect that we cherish humanity and good neighborliness as one of the key areas to protect ourselves. But second aspect is that Comorians, almost half of the Zanzibaris are partly from Comoro or from Tanzania mainland. And if you go to Seychelles, and Comoro itself, you look at even the language. I speak that language of Comoro. They call it Kingazija. If you look at the vocabularies, most of them resembles with the Kiswahili, and therefore anybody can speak Kiswahili, be able to be held in Comoro, and somebody speaking Comorian language be able to be understood in Tanzania. So we are very interrelated, and we look alike in many instances, and so that speaks a lot of volume for our connection. And for the case of Seychelles, actually, Tanzania was responsible for almost everything in the past for the last 20, 30 years, 1970s, 1980s. Tanzania was almost a donor state for Seychelles in terms of almost providing even agricultural officers, the people, journalists who could announce in most of their radios, even manning the country for sometimes in Seychelles.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much indeed for this clear explanation. And at least now we know where Comoro is, and of course the connection with Tanzania and East Africa, the African Union. And so we still have a few minutes, but you are welcome to ask a question or make a comment. So if you could, Assah, share a little bit about, lessons that, this operation Comoro has for us today. What would you say that these are the main lessons that you have learned? Because as you can see, we have lots of violence, conflicts in Africa, in East Africa, almost in every country. And what are the major lessons can we take from Comoro, the democracy operation?
First, I want to call this was one of the isolated isolated incidences within the architects of the African Union setup. Maybe something that I must share, and I don't want to be wrong.
I'm sorry, we have lost you, Assah.
Conflicts that
Could you
said
start
we
again?
want. No, I'm saying I don't want to be misquoted about this, and I want to be very clear about it. When Tanzania first assumed the role of the chair of the African Union in 2007, in our strategy, we said Tanzania is a country that has always sustained peace in one of the few countries in the world that has been very peaceful. We streamlined 5 key conflicts which were exist at that time that we must, at the end of our Tanzania chairmanship, they should be resolved. So there were about 5. So Comoro was one. The second one was Kenya. The third one was by then we were talking about comprehensive peace in Southern Sudan, the conflict that led to the birth of the new South Sudan, which Tanzania, former President Benjamin Mkapa, chaired the high-level panel of the UN in managing the separation of the Sudan and South Sudan, and then Burundi was partly also in, and DRC Congo. And at the conclusion of the Tanzania chairmanship, we had played a very great role in terms of scaling out the problems in Kenya. By then, for those who really follow closely, Kofi Annan, who was the chair of who was by then the mediator to the conflict in Kenya, had reached a point where he made it very clearly that he had developed a very severe flu, and he had declared that he was leaving the country. It was at the mid of the night that we had a call from Kenya saying, President Kikwete, you must be there, because there is a lot of frustration here. And President Kikwete had to flew at the mid of the night to go to Kenya, and his presence spoke a lot of volume in terms of convincing the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to accept to be co-opted in the government of Kenya as a prime minister. So it was not just local politics. It had a lot of enthusiasm and support from the neighbors, including Uganda and Tanzania. So we played quite a great role also in resolving the Kenyan aspect. So why am I speaking specifically that the Operation Democracy in Comoro was, I would want to call it as an isolated incident. It shouldn't be taken as a clear yardstick of the resolve the African Union to deal with the conflict in the nature that we dealt with. It was more to do with the strategy that was the property of the country that was chairing the process. And you'll also note that from all the players, including I've mentioned about Ambassador Francisca Madeira, who was because the first person who actually played a great role in terms of mediating the conflict in Comoro was Charles Ngakula. Engineer Charles Ngakula was a former transport minister from South Africa, who was the first person to be appointed by the African Union to mediate in Comoro. But his role was also taken by Francisca Madeira, a diplomat from Mozambique. So if you look at their role and Tanzania involvement into this, you find that it was only during this period that this operation was done, and was done actually when we talk about the countries that contributed troops. We are talking largely that Tanzania is the one that contributed many troops, including 2 battalions actually there. And so, if the lesson learned is that most of the conflict in Africa, for instance, the major problem of most of the conflict is not a conflict themselves, but what did you do after the conflict? So for a long time, for instance, let's take a case for Burundi, for instance. When there was a peace negotiation for Burundi, there was one political party, one rebel group that never subscribed to the to the Burundi peace talks process in Arusha. It was called Paripehutu FNL. During the time that we engaged that Paripehutu FNL, we had a series of discussions with the Paripehutu FNL, but until 2009 and 2010, they accepted to be integrated in the government. And that also marked possibly the end of the instability in Burundi. So it was part of the process to stabilize that country, and it was part of the plan of the Tanzania as a of the African Union as an individual country, if you want to say. Of course, Tanzania was acting on the auspices of the African Union, but the mandate came more and the push and a presence from within, from Tanzania, and possibly that contributed to the success of this. But the missing link and the lessons that possibly we need to deal with. One is an aspect that the transitional justice mechanisms are very important in terms of securing the lasting peace in any country that has been in the conflict. And if you look at what happened in Congo, we are talking about problems in Congo is because of the failed DDR and SSR. If we're talking about South Sudan, failed DDR and SSR in those countries. If you look at Comoro now, it's because after the operations, there was no mechanism put in place to ensure that this country do not recur again. Theories suggest that most of the conflict tend to recur again after 10 years. And if you look at all the countries that were once in conflict, in 2007, it happened in Comoro, and now we are talking for almost more than 6 years, we are talking a problem in Comoro. If you go to DRC, it's the same. So unless you institute a very clear institutions of governance, of course, institutional governance can be provided for in the security sector reforms, where you look at the bigger pictures of the conflict. Who are the people who brought to what we are into problems? Who are the people who are in the decision making but failed to make decision to stop the war? So all these contribute and tell a story that if you don't address those root causes, there is no way that you can guarantee peace in any country that emanates from the conflict.
Thank you so much indeed, Assah. And we are learning quite a lot, actually, now that you've touched upon a number of African countries. Well, if somebody has a question, please just ask. We have a few minutes left.
Thank you, Chair. I put up my hand.
Yes, please.
It's not so much of a question I wanted to ask, but more of a comment, and he could add to it from his own view. Let me start by saying I have learned a lot in this webinar discussion. I've learned a lot about the Comoro, which I didn't know. But what intrigues me is that one of the islands decided, is it Mayotte? Decided to stay with
Yes,
France.
Mayotte.
I find it intriguing when I look at the history in Africa where people were running away from colonialism. And to me, it looks like Mayotte is doing the reverse. And also when I hear happenings in West Africa, where many countries are beginning to say, no, we are no longer interested in being with the French. I don't know whether you have any views to add to this. My intrigue raises the question, why would Mayotte want to stay with France? What is so good? Maybe I'm asking the obvious, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, I hope I'm saying it correctly, your name, Odichipido. Odochipido.
Yes. There are two names there. Odochi
okay.
is one.
Odochipido.
Yeah, Pido is the second name.
Thank you. Well, let me give some few examples before touching to an aspect that you mentioned. If you go to China today, there's an island, there's an island that when the British were leaving China, they clinged on to stay in Macau. If you go to the border between Pakistan and India, you'll find that when the British were leaving both areas, they clinged on in one island in between. If you go to Seychelles today, there is an island called British Island within the country called Seychelles. And if you look at the structures of when Mwalimu Nyerere during the independence, there's one aspect that he mentioned, which possibly is very important to share with you in this audience. Maybe it can help to build a lesson to many others. When Mwalimu was assuming 4 months the presidency of Tanzania, he went to the parliament and made a public declaration that we are getting independence, but we are very excited whether the obligation of the predecessor colonial government decisions and treaties that were signed would continue to make sense in the new era, in the new government. And therefore, with his statement, he was also part of the members who went to the African Union in 1963. There were two discussions in 1963, 64, and there was a conclusion in the African Union structure that please, we should respect the colonial borders. But the only aspect that many forgot is that when Mwalimu was discussing about respecting the colonial borders, they were talking about colonial borders that were in favor of the Africans. Because Mwalimu had asked for a reflection moment to say, we need to learn about something. And so in 1963, it was a 2-year ultimatum that was given in 1961 to say whatever obligation of the predecessors, colonial governments, maybe we need to negotiate. So because we never negotiated, Tanzania assumed that all the treaties that were signed on behalf of us by the colonial government ceased to exist after 1963 ultimatum that Mwalimu Nyerere did put. And Mwalimu Nyerere's stance on this area has contributed significantly to the Vienna Convention of State Succession of 1978. So if you look at the structures of the Vienna Convention of 1978, you will find that part of the Mwalimu Nyerere assertions that succeeding the government is not automatic. So there are issues that you need to put in order. So for the case of Comoro, it's very unfortunate that many countries that were assuming power in Africa during the colonial were more excited to get political independence. And for the case of Comoro, and especially Mayotte, which I want to call it openly, it is the only remaining colony of the French in Africa.
I'm afraid we've lost you again, Assah. But I can see Donna Pido, you have raised your hand. Would like to say something? Please do so.
This is, excuse me, this is completely unrelated to anything that we have discussed today. I simply would like to know what other people think of the situation between Iran, the United States, and the rest of the world. The United States invaded Iran.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I was just concluding that the aspect of the Mayotte, first, it is the only remaining colony in Africa, and but it's also a fact that when they were doing a referendum, that the majority of people from the three islands, Moheli, Ngazija, and Anjouan, they voted in favor of being part of the Comoro. The Mayotte residents voted to be against Comoro and to be part of they call it a French département, Français département. And so But although if you look at the map of the Comoro, they still have the flag. I mean, the colors. If you look at the 4 colors that represent the Comorian map, one of the color, the yellow is Grand Comoro, the white is the Mwambene, and the red one is the Ngazija, and then the 4th one is Mayotte. So they represent those. These are islands. Comoro still considered part of the Comorian Union of the Comoros. I don't know whether I have responded to the question. I can see a hand from someone. Donna, or someone?
You did. Thank you so much.
Donna, you wanted to ask a question. You started actually asking about Iran and the US, etc. And maybe somebody has a response to that. Just briefly.
So can you say it again? Can you say the question again?
Yeah, the question is about. Donna, please go ahead.
What is anybody's take or evaluation of the situation in which the United States has attacked Iran and then claimed that they didn't really do that? And as an American, I'm concerned about my country not messing everybody else around, but that seems to be what's happening now, at least in part. And I did expect Iranian women to jump for joy at the loss of the Ayatollah Khamenei, because he was extremely evil to women, but maybe there are some people who don't agree with that. So I want to hear opinions, if anybody here has an opinion about that situation.
Well, let me say 2 things prior to comment on Iran. If you look at the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, if you want, the Persian Gulf, which Iran is a key player. You look at that, the first American involvement was more on Syria. And the Syria was more to be, if they were to win Syria, automatically they'll be closer to Iran. So in my opinion, the US has no what we call existential threat. Iran is not an existential threat to the US. But it's not. And Iran did not attack the US. But because of the global geopolitics that are connected to the natural resources within those countries, especially in Iran, and the aspect that Iran has oil, and of course Iran has been also supporting many terrorist groups. There's no doubt about it, in Lebanon, in many other countries. But if you want to resolve this conflict, it's not to address and see what is unfolding currently. If you look at the history of Iran involvement, the role of US in Lebanon in 1979, you will recall that the role played by US is what now created a situation which we are seeing unfolding currently. The US was, just like how it happened in Somalia, US was automatically, all their military muscles were also gutted down in Iran, in Lebanon in 1979, because the role of the US in Lebanon that year, they made an attempt that they were creating a government of national unity, but in the so doing, they took a separate group of Christians. They wanted to train them. And so this has automatically wrongly with Iran and many other countries that support Islamization in the Persian Gulf. Of course, the Iraq, you cannot talk about issues of Iraq and Kuwait in isolation to what is happening in Iran. Okay, yes, an aspect that Ayatollah being not democratically, not upholding the principles of democracy, especially on the issues of women. I did a study on one of the very key anthropology who taught me something called cultural relativism. When you want to make cultural relativism, when you want to make any comment about any country or any person, the best mechanism should be you wear the shoes of their shoes and see how it feels and be able to really comment very objectively. And on the aspect of the whether Iran is, I know there are many also institutions in Iran, like the Baha'i faith. They are not allowed to operate in Iran. These are many other religious groups that are not Christian, that are not Muslims. So I understand that partly there have been a lot of uprising and a lot of tension among the people who don't subscribe to the very fundamentalist sentiments of the Islamic stance. But largely, I want to believe that what is happening in Iran has more to do with the U.S. and the biblical, the aspect that many things that are written in the Bible and are taken by Israel as a Bible, so if you look at it automatically, the Lebanon has no future. And if Lebanon and Palestine has no future, definitely there must be a manifestation of something. And this is what we are seeing now, that Iran was partly supporting Lebanon and Palestine. And to support Palestine, automatically you are against you are against US and Israel. So unless we also come to terms with these two key issues, religious, yes, but the aspect that here there is a roadmap for peace in the Middle East, especially for a roadmap that calls the coexistence of both Israel and Palestine as a sovereign state or as sovereign countries. And unfortunately, we are not seeing that the U.S. playing its role in terms of putting or aligning those politics and roadmap in a clear as it was decided upon by the UN Security Council.
That's a lot of words. Wow.
Thank you. So the U.S.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Indeed, we are slowly coming to the end, but I can see Mary Ma, you've raised your hand. And if Peter would like to say something, then we'll close. Mary, please. Mary Ma.
Okay, thank you. Just you talk about Hong Kong and about British and Hong Kong the relationship. I told you after Britain left Hong Kong, the city became extremely terrible, chaotic. People lost job, and my friend cried every day because it's terrible. Since I have question is, if Comoro want to French to support the country, after will be happened, maybe good, maybe look like Hong Kong and look like Mango is extremely terrible feeling. And I'm living Qingdao. Before was colonized by Germany, and after Germany left Qingdao, my hometown, it's terrible feeling. People lost the job, people lost the feeling, the religion. My family, my grandma, my mama, dad also believe in Bible, but I also believe in Bible from Germany. And now I can talk with international, but I'm not talk with real Chinese people. I don't know what is Chinese real culture, because my family was colonized by Germany. So I have question: if Comoro was colonized by French, and now we want to support by the French, what will be happen? The children will be find their identity, and the children can talk with African people or something. I don't know. I told you I can't talk with the Chinese rural people because my thinking is colonized by Germany. Okay.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether you have heard something called Opium War in Hong Kong. Have you heard about something like that? Opium War.
I don't know. I'm not in Hong Kong,
Okay.
but I talked with my friend. My friend
Okay.
and my friend told me Hong Kong is burning.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say two things about Hong Kong and the connection to China. Twofold. One is that before the colonialists came to China, there was China before.
Mm-hmm.
And so China existed before the colonies.
Yeah,
so what
yes, it's colony. You know,
yes,
East, yes.
Sure. So if you agree with me that China existed before the colonies, so there was one China before.
This is really good question. You know, Chinese had many fights for the colon, you know, because the British come and fight, Japanese come and fight, and Germany come and fight, American come and fight. Always, my hometown Qingdao people fought each other. You know, they killed each other. They killed the family. But the colony, the country, Germany, Japanese, and British, they are always totally rich and safety. You know, the colony, the colony, the country.
First class.
Pardon? Sorry.
Okay. Going to exist. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but unfortunately, we are really sorry that we are running out of time. But this question is a very important one. I think, you know, this is actually a question on decolonization, recolonization. Probably we need really a separate session for this. If you agree with me, we are going to plan so that we can discuss this in detail, because I can see we are really out of time. And sorry about that.
Okay.
If I may, first of all, I should thank everybody really for your time, and for our speaker, definitely we thank you so much indeed. You may say, like, for 1 minute, just your final words, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week on Wednesday. So thank you so much. And so if you could, Assah, say a few words.
First, apologies for the hiccups of the technological problems. Nobody would anticipate that will happen, so apologies for what happened. But the second aspect is that I think, as you rightly said, we need a very proper discussion. I've had a first-hand training in China. Actually, I went to the Mao Zedong home in Changsha in Hunan. And I was happy to learn something there, and especially the connection that existed between the British. He's talking about German, but the British and the what happened, that the 50 years that Hong Kong had to exist with China as a one country but two world, and so it was separately, adopted to a kind of accommodate the diversity that existed because of the colonial inclination between the two areas of the mainland China and Hong Kong. And so maybe we need a proper discussion about this. And maybe we could be also sharing a lot. I could see the lady has quite a lot, but unfortunately the context is very different. We are talking about colonization, decolonization, and colonization, but he's talking about a manifestation of individual events from colonial, players. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much indeed, Assah Mwambene, for your time, for being with us, and for sharing your experience, particularly on Comoro. But it has also raised a number of interesting issues. So let's get prepared for another exciting talk. Thank you very much indeed, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mtayama, for that.
It's my